Just a quick correction before we start the pod. You'll hear Danny and I talking about the Dolomyths Sky Race a little bit later. We accidentally said that it was on Friday at 8 a.m., but the race is actually Saturday at 8 a.m. Central European time. So enjoy the pod and thanks. Welcome to the SubHub podcast. I'm MK Sullivan.
And I'm Danny Moreno. And today we are going to do kind of a two-part episode. The first part is MK and I are going to talk about our personal knowledge and experience with traveling to races. So this is mostly geared initially, I would say, to races abroad. So if you're in the United States, going to Europe, vice versa, or maybe to other continents. But this can also apply at a more domestic level. And then after that, we are going to dive into a race preview for the Dolomyths Sky Race, which is this weekend in the next stop of the Golden Trail World Series.
Yes, it's going to be an exciting race to watch.
Yes, definitely.
Definitely the most technical race in the entire series.
Yes, way more technical. And like we've mentioned in our previous episode, this is a really cool race because it allows, kind of people who have been on the sky running circuit and people who've been in the Golden Trail World Series to kind of meet in the middle, which is awesome. But let's first start with travel tips. This topic really came up organically in a way from people kind of reaching out to us and asking questions about, what we do when we're heading out to races. And I think maybe a lot of this is due largely to the UTMB week coming up, the big trek across the pond for many people in other countries. And so, we just would love to talk about, kind of planning, packing, etc., in those different categories.
Yeah. And I will start by saying that I think, at least for me, I have definitely learned over the last year and a half what to do and what not to do. I would say my first trip, I did too much in terms of like traveling beforehand and not like being there, recovering and like seeing the course. So, you'll figure it out as you go, but we'll try to give you the best tips that we can to get started here.
Definitely. And I will say too, I don't know if you would call us travel experts. This is purely based off experience. I personally have been traveling quite a bit since 2021. And then even before COVID, I traveled quite a lot for work. And so would kind of manage that balance of work travel and running travel. So yeah. Cool. I'm personally very excited about this because this actually was a large part of my job when I used to work in tech was, building out travel itineraries, etc. So the first category that we'd like to discuss is planning. So this is everything that you're going to do leading up to actually, starting your trip. So something that we wanted to highlight, some tools that I like to use and MK likes to use to travel. Personally, I have a very built out, what I feel like is a very good spreadsheet that I use pretty much at the start of every year. And then I have like sheets or pages on that sheet for each trip that I take. So that's definitely customized to myself. And then Google Flights or, Expedia, Kayak to help you try and find those flights. Google Maps, and then Maps.me is kind of like a place where you could download maps that I always found to be extremely helpful if for some reason your Google Maps isn't connecting to Wi-Fi. And then this is my holy grail, and I hope everyone treasures this share if they don't already know about this. But Rome to Rio is my life Bible when it comes to traveling.
Yeah, it's Rome to Rio is the website where you can look up trains, planes, buses, automobiles, anything you need.
Exactly. Yeah. You pretty much plug in point A to point B, and it can be so random. It could be I don't know, maybe this isn't random, but the Golden Gate Bridge to Chamonix, what's it called? Athletic Center. And it'll tell you exactly how to get from point A to B using, what she said, planes, trains, and automobiles. So I personally love that.
It'll help you get the tickets too.
It'll help you get the tickets too and kind of give you a range of price for all the things.
Yeah. Yeah, Google Flights is my go-to for flights, obviously. So I we'll talk a little bit about this later, but I tend to stick to like specific airlines so that I can either have an account there already or like get miles and stuff. But just using the platform to find flight itineraries where you can use, like, say you're using United, it'll also give you all their partner airlines as well. Where sometimes if you would just go straight to like the United website, like they just try to put you on United flights. And so it's really nice to use Google Maps or Google Flights because it can build out these itineraries for you that are a little bit more efficient, but also keep you within the point system.
Yeah. No, I love that too. And you can use that in combination with Hopper too. Hopper is another app. It has like a little bunny on it, which is really cute. But you can, I usually use Google Flights to identify the flights that I want, and then we'll track them through both the apps. And then it'll kind of like notify you when the price drops, which is extremely helpful to save some money, which kind of rolls into the next part of planning during this aspect, like how to keep costs down. So like MK said, really, if you can utilize the aspect of being on the same flights, I feel like that's one of the main things that will help you save money.
Yeah. Or if you are somebody that has a credit card that gets you miles for a specific airline, like obviously spend all of your money that you can on the credit card leading into this trip. But loyalty points are huge for traveling, especially far like this.
Yeah. And there's always, like MK said, like different credit cards. I remember one year I learned I was going to Alaska. And so suddenly I got an Alaska credit card. I wouldn't recommend that all the time. But also with like hotels and rental cars. And then what was the other thing that I was thinking of? It's credit cards and stuff like that. Yeah, sorry. That's about where my brain stops. I forgot the other thing.
No, it's all right. Even if you use a website like Expedia and you have an account, like after a while, you can accrue some actual money to use on like hotels and stuff. So yeah, be a loyalty member to some airline, some chain of hotels, a car rental like Enterprise or something. And yeah, even a website like Expedia where you can get money back for spending too much money.
Yeah, but we're not advocating going into debt. This is
yeah. No, use your credit card for everything that you know that you can pay back.
Yeah, exactly. This is also financial advice.
Don't
overspend on a credit card. But yeah, that's definitely a way to keep costs down. Another thing is just, book as early as you can and, try to utilize those options where you could cancel up into a certain date and you get your full money back. I find that that's very helpful. And then, yeah.
Well, and even if, like with Google Flights, like Danny said, you can track the prices. And I don't know how like necessarily true this is. Like that you look up on websites like, oh, what day is the best day of the week to book flights? But I swear every Monday I get like a notification that like the price of my flights has dropped. And then by the end of the week, they've risen again and then they drop again on Monday. So like notice those trends in your tracking and make sure you book on that day that saves you like, it might even be just $200, but you could use that $200 to buy an economy plus where you could change your flight instead of an economy where you can't do anything but cancel it and lose your money.
Yeah, no, definitely. So the two main areas that I would say that come into the loyalty are the two areas that you're probably going to need the most if you're going to be traveling abroad. Like we said, that's mostly what this is geared towards. So renting a car, there's pros and cons to that. And then your accommodations. Again, with renting a car, there are loyalty member options with Hertz and, Enterprise, etc. Definitely when I'm weighing the pros and cons of a car, the first thing I ask myself is how often am I actually going to use it? If I feel like I'm going to get my money's worth for the amount of time that I'm going to have it. Another thing is if there's going to be like road tolls, etc. So you may think, oh, I'm going to be using this car. Maybe you take into consideration the gas and then suddenly you're in Switzerland. And it's like, oh, I also need to buy a $40 or euro ticket. Or if you made the mistake like me and you don't buy the ticket, and then suddenly you have a $200, toll fee. And then suddenly the rental car cancels itself out. I have made that mistake maybe 3 times. I finally learned my lesson last year. But yeah, just look into those different things. For me, renting a car is most advantageous when you're sharing it with friends. That's when I feel like you get the most bang for your buck. And if you've never been to Europe, in America, I would say most of us are used to driving an automatic car. And so if you can drive manual, or you have a friend that can drive manual, that is definitely money in your pocket, because it is significantly less of a cost if you rent a manual car versus an automatic car too.
Yeah. And, as Americans, we are not used to utilizing public transportation at all. But especially like talking about going to Chamonix, for example, for UTMB week, I am not renting a car at all, because you can get from the airport in Geneva to Chamonix on a bus in an hour and 15 minutes. And when you get to Chamonix, the town is small and there's a train, and like the public transportation is just fine. So I think to get to Chamonix and back, the bus cost me like $40.
Yeah. And also a lot of times too, when you're in epicenters like Chamonix, there's not always parking if at your hotel, or that's another cost, is like it costs 10 euros a day to park your car. So going back to, are you actually going to use that car and get the worth for maybe the 3 hours of driving, or maybe it's going to save you 3 hours in total? Those are all things to look into. Public transportation and stuff like that is great. Also, consider rideshare apps like Lyft and Uber, where, maybe that is worth the cost to jump on an Uber instead of going on the train, because it does save you some time. So there's many options. I think that's all good for the car. Oh, this is kind of a pro tip. This is pretty funny, and something I've learned too is, if you don't know already, if you do end up getting a car, definitely do like a recording of your entire car the day of, because I've had it happen 3 times where they'll send me an email afterwards in various parts of the world and tell me that I messed up a car, and that video has saved me 3 times. And the last time I was doing it, I forget where I was. This man was like, "Oh, I'm going to start doing that too," because it timestamps the video and everything. So that's very helpful.
Yeah, I started doing that, I think like 2 trips ago, because I don't know that anybody's ever told me to do that, but until I went to I think it was Ireland, and they were like, "Make sure you take pictures of the whole car before you leave." And I was like, "What? Why?" But it does make sense, because if it says like, "Oh, I took this on July 11th and you turned it in on July 17th," like they should know what it looked like beforehand.
Exactly.
That's nice.
That is nice. So accommodations, the other main aspect, I think this is very multifaceted and very personal. There's multiple options. So main one, and I guess most obvious one for some people, is hotels, then Airbnbs. And then if you just happen to know some people in the area, staying with them. And then we also got a question about camping, which is an option, especially if you're traveling within the US to a lot of these mountain towns where there's like BLM land, etc. Even here in Chamonix, there's places where people park their vans, etc. And to me, this is, again, just like going through a list of pros and cons of how close you want to be to the race, how many amenities you want, etc. Again, with hotel points, like, you do get those loyalty points, but they do tend to be pricier, unless sometimes they have some sort of like agreement with the race. But just know that those book up incredibly quick. So if you're going to jump on that, to do that quickly.
Yeah, I would say that my 2 kind of comparisons for a hotel versus an Airbnb. Hotels are easy because like you just go, you check in, you don't have to deal with anything. They do everything for you. But the nice thing about an Airbnb for me personally is having a kitchen. I like to be able to, especially the week of a race, like cook a lot of my own food, just like I would at home. Although that can like bring up some inconveniences, like having to figure out the grocery stores, which in Chamonix are like really weird and small. But I like having a kitchen so that I can cook my own stuff. If you're somebody that like doesn't need a kitchen, just get a hotel if it's cheaper.
Yeah.
Because it's way easier than an Airbnb most of the time.
Yeah, I would say so too. I would say so. I enjoy hotels for very short races where I'm probably maybe gonna cook once or I'll go to like a hot bar, but it's like very quick. And Airbnbs is usually like 3 days or longer because like MK said, you get the kitchen, you also get laundry, which is nice most of the time. And yeah, that helps a ton.
Yeah, I would say for most US races, I end up just getting a hotel because I'm usually only there for like a day or two.
Yeah.
But when I travel abroad, I like to have an Airbnb for the most part.
I would say so too.
In terms of camping, I think it just kind of depends on who you are. If you're somebody that camps all the time and like you sleep really well on the ground or in your camper or whatever, do it. I mean, I don't see why not. My husband and I have definitely camped before a couple of races. But we also have like a truck bed camper with a really nice, comfortable bed. So I can sleep really well in that thing the night before a race. Whereas if I had to sleep on the ground, I probably wouldn't be sleeping. Just depends on who you are.
Yeah, I think you kind of pick your own adventure for that. For me, I have camped also earlier in my career. And then as things kind of became more serious, I mean, overall fun, but like more the reasons for racing started changing, then I started opting for like hotels and stuff like that. Also, sometimes with races, I would say, especially in the US, sometimes they'll have like open fields where you can camp. And personally, that's a little tough for me because you don't know like most of the people there and they're all on different clocks. So one time I did that and, there's people waking up at 3 a.m. and the race isn't until 8 a.m. and you're also suddenly awake. So that was a little bit difficult for me, but it's also extremely fun because you get to meet people also in this space, which is awesome.
Yeah, I would say just pay attention to the weather because I camped before Mammoth Trail Fest last year and it was hot, so hot during the day. And then I had my down sleeping bag and I froze to death the night before the race and like barely slept because I was freezing. I was still comfortable. I was just cold.
Yeah.
So check the weather. Make sure you're not going to freeze and then you can probably camp and have fun. And then I think the point of the question also was that they were trying to save money and also like be able to bring family with them. So, if you want to have that support system there and they're willing to camp with you and have breakfast in the morning and stuff, do it.
Yeah. Yeah, no, definitely. That sounds wonderful. This question actually probably should have been a couple of minutes earlier, but along the lines of booking your flights with like you Google Flights, etc. How do you actually pick the time for your flights? So this one is actually a very specific question. So maybe me and MK are both on the West Coast, and this question is about that. Best time to leave from the West Coast to go to Europe. So maybe just like adjust based on where you are in the US, since this is mostly speaking to our American listeners. This is definitely based on preference. So personally for me, I love to take the earliest flights possible to get me into Europe as early as possible because it's roughly a like 24-hour journey with layovers and connections, etc. And so I like to land like before 10 a.m. if I can. And then if I'm feeling really tired by the time I get to my destination and it's not past like 2 p.m., then I will take a nap. But like hard line on the nap because I've made the mistake before where I fall asleep and then suddenly it's 8 p.m. and then the next 3 days are just horrible because I'm trying to get on schedule. So that it helps if you're traveling with someone because they can keep you accountable. But yeah, I personally like to land really early. And then if I end up needing to land later, then really force the no nap and really force it to like that first night of sleep, you're going to bed on time.
Yeah, I also like morning flights, but not quite as early as Danny. I'd say I like the 10 a.m. to 11 a.m. kind of time frame. And then I land, around 10 a.m. to noon, because then I can drive to wherever I'm going. It's like late enough that I can, go for a run, like shake out, have dinner, and then like immediately go to bed at like 8 p.m. by the time I'm done with all that stuff. Because and we can talk more about like flights and stuff, but I don't sleep. I can't sleep when I'm traveling. And so like I need to get to that 8 p.m. like sleep time within. If I get there too early, if I get there too early, I'm going to fall asleep. So I'm like landing at noon, driving to wherever I'm getting, eating some food, going for a run, eating some more food, and going to bed.
I love that. Yeah, we'll get into the travel itself too a little bit deeper because there's so much to unpack there. So that's from the West Coast. So both of us basically try and leave in the earlier part of the day. Don't really want to land in the night and not have a chance. I feel like the shakeout run is so key. Or anything. It doesn't need to be a shakeout run, just like a walk outside for your body to kind of like see the natural light and stuff like that. To give yourself enough time to do that, I think is really critical. So
I think the other reason to fly in the morning also is I would just count on a delay or missing a flight or a flight getting canceled. Like I would just assume it's going to happen. And if you have a great travel day, that's perfect. And so if you have made your travel day early enough, like when I was buying my flights to Chamonix, I checked to make sure that there were flights later in the day in case I missed this one flight that had a connection that was tight. And so if you leave too late in the day, and like say you leave the West Coast at like 2 p.m. and you're supposed to land at like 3 p.m., but the last flight, you totally miss it, and then there's nothing to make up for that. Like that's another reason for me to leave early, because I feel like my travel pretty much always gets messed up.
Yeah. No, that's such a critical point because once you get into Europe, say you're doing a race, like, which is, somewhat common, like Trans-Gran Canaria. So going to the Canary Islands or Madeira, you land in Europe and you still have 1 to 2 additional like smaller flights, or you're like getting on a boat. And most of those things stop going at like 5 p.m. So if you're supposed to land at 2 p.m. and you run into struggles and then you land at like 6 p.m., suddenly you've added not just like a couple hours, but an entire day to your travel, which just adds more to do. But like we said, always be ready. Just be ready for something to not go right. That's probably more often than things going perfect.
Yeah. And so I would say also make sure that your layovers are long enough that you feel comfortable. Yes. Because I used to be the person that was like, I want to make this travel day as short as I possibly can. So I'm going to find like the 18-hour day. But those 18-hour days are like, the layovers are like 45 minutes to 90 minutes, which is never enough time because you always have to go through customs at like when you get into a new airport. Some airports also make you go through security again after customs. You just like never know what that's going to look like. So just give yourself enough time to make it not stressful and give yourself a chance to not miss your connecting flights.
And also too, like that gives, if you do have to check a bag in or you chose to, that gives your more time for your bag to get onto the new flight, especially if you're changing airlines. The more time, the better. So if you're switching from like United to KLM at some point, then, that gives them time to switch it over. Yeah. So speaking about luggage, packing itself, part of the planning process, this honestly was probably the most common question we got between the SubHub and then the other posts that I did today on the stories is talking about how to pack your powders and nutrition. Just to, emphasize again, me and MK are not TSA agents, but personally, I honestly haven't had too much trouble with this. I know some other athletes have, but basically the rule that I've made for myself is pack enough gels in my carry-on bag for race day. Like even if I'm there for a long trip, pack as if that's my race day pack. And then anything extra goes into my check-in bag. So yeah, this is an assumption you have a check-in bag. And then as far as powders themselves, I'm a big powder person. I have protein powder, collagen, etc. And so what I do is when I'm at home, however the combinations make sense. So like, for example, right now I'm in Chamonix and I brought 2 jars. And so one has protein powder and collagen, and the other one has my like beets and ginger mix. And I mixed that stuff together just to consolidate. So instead of there being 4 big things, I just packed enough for the time I need here.
And I would say that this also goes back to like the layover point, like make sure that you have enough time, because I don't often get checked for my nutrition in my bag. I'm the same as Danny. I'm going to pack as much as I need for race day in my carry-on, maybe a couple extras, and then everything else goes into my checked bag. But if you do get stopped for your powders, you're just going to have to wait for them to check it. I've never had them take it away from me. They're always like, what the hell is this? And I'm like, oh, it's a hydration mix, or like, that's food for my race. And they're just like, oh, okay. And then you're good to go. So just like plan for that extra like 10 to 15 minutes, like in security, because they're possibly going to pull your bag. Honestly, same with rollers. If you have one of those clamp rollers, they always think it's a weird battery pack for some reason. So like, yeah, just plan for them to be like, what the hell do you have in your bag? And then it'll be less stressful.
Yes, definitely. And then as far as like what else goes into, say, the carry-on versus checked-in bag, if anyone has ever run high school or college track and field, probably the most common thing you've heard many people say, and we will say the same thing, is to put your race kit in your carry-on if you can. And then I try to bring at least my race shoes, and then usually I'm wearing like another pair of shoes. So I have at least 2 pairs of shoes. So that means, the vest goes in there, empty flask, which double pro tip. I also, if I'm on a like 7-hour flight, I'll just fill the flask too right before that flight. And then suddenly my water source is tripled. And then the gels, and then, yeah, just like your entire kit. And then I normally will put in like 1 extra outfit just in case my check bag doesn't make it, which happens.
Yeah. And remember, for races like trail races over in Europe, that your race kit also includes your mandatory gear. So anything that you wouldn't be able to buy in Europe, like sometimes I won't pack like and this is silly because it doesn't weigh anything, but sometimes I won't pack like the ace bandage or stuff like that. But like your rain jacket, you're not going to want to replace that when you get to Europe. Your pack, you're not going to want to replace that when you get to Europe. So make sure that you put that in your carry-on bag. It gets a little packed, but you will be very grateful when you maybe accidentally lose your bag on the way to Europe. And then I actually, on the note of packing an extra change of clothes, I always pack like my toothbrush, my deodorant, and like, your toiletries in your backpack, because I have been stuck overnight many times when I have not wanted to be stuck overnight.
Yeah, no, definitely. Yeah, I call it like it's like my magic pouch, very similar to MK. Usually I'll add like my face spritz in there, and then I have some like lavender that I'll usually bring, so that on the flight I do this whole routine where I clean my face and I put some spritz and lavender just to help like make me think I'm in somewhere else, to help me calm down. So yeah, it's definitely nice to have those little things.
Yeah, I would agree. I always brush my teeth like when it's like time to go to bed on the plane. Yeah. I'm like, maybe this will make me tired. And it never does. But I try.
It's the effort that counts. Yeah. Okay, so now you are planned. Hopefully your flights are booked. Don't forget to make sure you are registered for the race. Speaking from personal experience, that was hilarious. And you also have your carry-on bag and your checked-in bag. Okay, so now you are traveling. You're actually traveling. So we're first going to go over if you're on an airplane, since this might be the most common. just a couple of things as far as nutrition goes, because this was also a question that we got. Personally, and I would say most people probably agree, number one thing is to drink lots and lots of water. This helps for many of reasons. Staying hydrated in kind of like the compressed air, you'll be very thankful once you land. The water also helps it so your blood flows a little bit better when you're actually sitting down for so long, with that sort of stuff. And then water actually helps like increase your immunity system as well while you're traveling.
Yeah, and I pretty much always pack at least one, if not two, like electrolyte packs, so that when they bring you like the little waters as they walk around all night, I like to have just some electrolytes in there. And I don't know about you, Danny, but I drink a ton of water when I fly. So I try to pick an aisle seat for long trips like this because one, I'm going to get up to go to the bathroom like every 90 minutes. And two, like I want to be able to get up and move without stepping over people.
Yeah, I love that. That's a great tip. Yeah, I would say by default, I normally pick aisle seats, but I love that just like as a great reminder. Another thing is from personal experience, I wish I could tell my younger self that you really need to eat while you're traveling. I had the dumb mindset or uneducated mindset that I felt that, and this is speaking to like college Danny, that because I'm not running or because I'm not sedentary, I don't need as many calories. That is definitely not the truth. You definitely need to be eating as if you normally would because your body is still on. Like if anything, you tend to be more on when you're traveling, from both
you're stressed.
You're stressed. Yeah. From like a stress standpoint. And also just like physiologically, you may not actually fall into a REM sleep. And so your body is on just like burning calories to stay awake. And so I have found that I actually do a lot better if I focus on eating like proteins and fats while I'm traveling. And normally I'll bring like a collapsible kind of, what is it called? Like bento box sort of thing. And so I'll bring like cheeses and fruits and crackers. And then I'll also have like a bag of beef jerky, which obviously doesn't work if you're vegan, but you get the point. So try to bring stuff like that if you want to try and save money. If not, when you're in the airport, just think like you need to be eating.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I've also been like sitting on a plane, like eating the meal and being like, I just feel full because I haven't done anything. It's like, no, you're not. You're not full. Yeah. Just eat the food.
Yeah. Exactly.
You'll be starving by the time you get off the plane and you like have to drive.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. Yeah. So always take pretzels if you can. Remember to do that. Just a couple of things that probably won't go well. Bananas. I've never had a banana experience that went well. And then personally, if I haven't already cut the fruit, I usually try not to bring stuff with skin because it like yucks me out personally, just because you're like going through an airport and stuff. So anything that you can like seal and unseal, again, that's just personal preference there. And then, it is also a personal preference if you want to be wearing a mask or not. I still do it when I'm like traveling through the airport, especially like at really busy times. If it's not as busy, then I won't, just to make sure like you really are protecting yourself before the race. So again, total personal preference on that one.
Yeah, I was going to say the same thing. We still travel with like masks and stuff, especially to races. And especially if you're going to be there, like, if you're not flying in right before the race, if you're going to be there like 7 to 10 days beforehand and you get sick on the plane, like you're going to be sick on race day. So you might as well just like play it safe. It doesn't have to be COVID. It can literally be any type of illness. Like people are sick all the time. So, but yeah, personal preference. So things to bring on to the plane to make yourself comfortable. Danny may have more than I do just because I know I'm not going to sleep. I try really hard. It's just not who I am as a person, but I like to have pants on because I feel like wearing shorts on a plane is never that as comfortable as you think it's going to be. And a sweatshirt. I like to like put my little hood over my head and tie it around my eyeballs to try to like make it dark in there, and I blast the air conditioner so that I'm cold and have to wear my sweatshirt. But I do just like to be very, very cozy. Compression socks are always a great idea because you're going to get off the plane and have like the fattest ankles and calves of your life. And it's going to feel like they are never going to bend again. So if you can get a pair of compression socks, that minimizes it a lot. It's not going to get away or do away with it completely, but it will minimize the swelling that you get from sitting around in the plane.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of compression socks, game changer. Even if you don't have compression socks or just have like the calf sleeves, big game changer there. I also like to be very cozy, and I always see these people who are dressed so nice and like look slick, and I feel like I'm like a little, I don't know, troll in my stuff. Yeah. I'm like, I still look like I'm in high school, but I don't care. I'm super cozy. And I'm a big neck pillow person because I do kind of have somewhat of a superpower. I can mostly fall asleep on planes, which I know isn't the case for everyone. And then I personally bring some like sleepy time tea so that when they come around with, drink options, I'll ask for hot water and make my own tea. And then if you are going to try and sleep on the plane, again, just thinking back to mistakes I made, I personally used to be so addicted to watching all the new released movies. And I would just watch like 6 of them, 4 of them, and just not sleep. So I have a lot more control or just this temptation of watching any movies I feel like I missed in theaters, and just really cutting down that screen time. And something I always tell myself too is like, even if you can't get into a deep REM sleep, you're still resting. So don't freak out if you can't fall asleep once you get to the new location. You're still, sitting down and taking that time in, which is nice. Somewhat contradicting to what I just said, but that's more of like a calorie standpoint.
Yeah. I would say that like, for me, cause I don't sleep on planes, like with the movie thing, if I watch a movie, like I'm just like, I'm awake. I'm not resting at all. So what I like to do is I'll bring a book and I will finish like most of a book on an international flight. And like in between chapters, I'll like try to fall asleep. I'll close my eyes a little bit and then I'll read again. And I feel way better than if I have sat on the plane and watched 6 movies in 12 hours. So, if you can't fall asleep, like I would suggest like a book or like games that don't involve your phone. Tommy and I sometimes will bring cards and we'll play Kings in the Corner for like 6 hours. Just, maybe watch one movie, but don't do it the whole time.
Yeah. The coloring books too, like the adult coloring. That's great. Okay. So again, traveling itself, this kind of goes into the planning as well, but, before we go to the next one of when to try and arrive, which, we kind of missed that, is if you're going to drive by car, to the location of your race. For me personally, this is a newer rule that I made myself in the last couple of years, and I feel like it has been so helpful. It is kind of, again, it takes some dedication, or what do you call that when you make yourself do something you don't want to do in a good way? I forget what it's
perseverance.
Perseverance.
I don't think that's the right word.
I don't think that's the right word either. Somebody's going to know what word we're trying to say. But if it's more than 3 hours, really just like pulling over on the side of the road and getting out and just kind of like stretching, doing some lunges, getting the hips moving, because I started to have like low back pain from just driving so much. So I found that's extremely helpful. And again, still compression socks.
Yeah. I do that on the plane too. Like people look at you like you're crazy, but when you go to the bathroom, lunge your way down that aisle. Do some lunges, do some stretches, like get the weird looks. Every time I get up to move on the plane, I'm like doing some like toe raises or heel raises, some squats, some stretching. You gotta move. Try to move as much as you can.
I totally forgot that. Yeah. No, I love that. Or you go into that little space where like sometimes the trolley is at. And get some leg swings in or something. That's great. Okay, so we did plane, you're on the plane, you're on the car. Again, if you're driving in your car, you probably access your own food and way more options than on a plane. So we'll skip that. Um, okay, so as far as timing, there's like timing to sea level if you live at altitude, and timing to altitude if you are traveling to a place that is higher or lower. Okay, so if you live at a higher altitude and you're traveling to sea level, there's a few different things to take into consideration. One is it's going to get easier over time. So say you just like moved to altitude and this is like your first of three races at sea level, it's going to be a little bit difficult to figure out like what that sweet spot is for you. One of the main things is like when you first move to altitude, your body is still adjusting from like a red blood cell standpoint, but also how to actually intake air when you're running. At both like a high intensity and low intensity. So anyone who's been in this position, maybe you can remember that, you know, when you go down to sea level for the first time, you're still kind of breathing very, like the exhale is very strong. You're like, because you can't quite figure out how to intake air, that now there's a ton of it. And so it's better to actually go down much further from the race for your, like your first couple of goes to allow your body to get back to more of that efficient breathing. Now, the longer that you live at altitude, the better that your body then adjusts to that training and you start to breathe a little bit normal again. And then this is where you really start to refine what that sweet window is. So for example, for me at first, it was like my body wouldn't adjust until like 5 to 6 days. And now I know I can show up like 2.5 days before a race at sea level and it's fine. So plan your travel accordingly. If you, and anything on that for you, MK?
Yeah, I was going to say, this may not even be like very scientific. It might just be kind of personal preference or observation. But when I come down from altitude to sea level, I like to incorporate strides or something like race pace effort every day that I'm down there. Just because like when you're at altitude, you don't get the same kind of stimulus because you can't run quite as fast. And so, yeah, like just being able to like turn over every day just to like feel, I guess, a little poppier has always like mentally been really good for me when I come down to sea level.
Yeah, I would agree with that too. And I find like that helps you adjust also to the sea level in general. Something about like raising your heart rate and making yourself go faster, I think helps a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then if you're at sea level and going to altitude, this is kind of a mixed bag. What I mentioned before with going down to sea level, some of those stats were actually taken from a study that we can link in the show notes for people. But sea level to altitude, I personally think is a bit harder because you can either go like right before the race, or you can go more like 2 to 3 days and then after that. So you either want to go like 1 to 2 days, or you go like more like, like 5, 6, 5 plus. Sorry, that's how you should say that. Because after like the first 48 hours, your body is then like, oh, we're in a new space. We need to start readjusting our whole, like our blood cells, etc. And so you're actually going to start to get really tired. And I think
it's something like 48 hours in, like your red blood cell count drops dramatically. And so if you can get there like 1 to 2 days before that, like, you know, before you hit that 48 hours, like, and run the race, like you might be fine. But then there's going to be, if you are there after the 48 hours, there'll be like a 2-day like slump where you just feel like absolute trash before your body can kind of like start reproducing those blood cells again and be like, okay, we can handle this. It just took a couple days to get there. So yeah, it either has to be like right before, or I would say, 5+ days before.
Yeah. And I would definitely say like, you know, I found that like up to 4,000 to 5,000 feet, it wasn't too drastic how difficult it felt. But after 5,000 feet was when I preferred to stay after. This is when I used to live at sea level a couple of years ago, to have at least like that 48 after that 48 hours. And also, this is kind of like maybe a little tough love, but it's going to be hard no matter what. You live at sea level, you train at sea level, and you're going to a place with much thinner air. So kind of just like mentally prepare yourself that it's going to be a hard time. And, you're probably going to have to drink more water and eat more food during the race. That'll be more for race planning episodes some other time. But you're going to be blessed with beautiful views and a great course.
Yeah.
Basically.
But also drink more water just in general when you get there. Because altitude,
drink more water.
Altitude will drain you right dry. Because most areas in the US, at least that are at altitude, are very dry. And so you don't realize how dehydrated you're getting if you're from sea level and like maybe you have humidity. So make sure that you are drinking that water.
Yes, definitely. Yeah. Number one cause of altitude sickness is dehydration and like some imbalance of like the electrolytes. And then, you start to go down the list from there. Another thing when you land from travel, so this is all kind of encompassing of this, like, you're landing at altitude, landing at sea level, like MK and I said, really, if you can get outside and look at the light, your body is actually really good to adjusting that way. Doesn't need to be a shakeout. It can literally just be a walk to the grocery store. But yeah, just remember that like a travel day isn't a rest day. It shouldn't be on your calendar as like, I'm recovering this day because I'm traveling across the world or the US. It's like we said, your mind is active the entire time. So just be patient with yourself and let the days kind of come day by day.
Yeah, I pretty much never, ever, ever, ever want to run/hike when I get to where I need to be. But I always try to do something. Even if it's, when I got to Worlds, I just hiked up the first climb because I stayed close enough to it that I could walk from my house. And getting out the door was like pulling my eyeballs out. But once I finished, I felt so much better. Like my body was less tight. It kind of helps you like get rid of all the, for me, the ankle swelling and also just like, it kind of helps you balance also, I think, with going to bed at a reasonable time. You get there at 4 p.m., you go for a run, kind of like you would if you run after work. And then you are like, oh, I'm back to kind of normal now.
Yeah. Yeah. I would say most of the time it takes me at least 3 days before I get adjusted, and don't force it. I've taken some falls that I have actual scars from because I forced, a downhill that I'm like, I should really walk this, but I should be able to run down this. And then I just eat shit and fall on my face. So yeah, don't force anything. And you got plenty of time, hopefully, before that. Okay. And kind of like the last thing is once you do land and, again, we recognize that not everyone has the luxury of being there many days beforehand. But once you land, take care of yourself, and just like a couple of things to be aware of. Don't let this stress you out, but hopefully it becomes second nature is, cooking your own food when you can, especially on that first day, because again, like you were just stressed, you might've been exposed to some germs or something like that. So really like nourish your immunity system if you can with good foods, hydrate. And just remember too, like with water, in some spaces, it's not the same quality, or water's not the same everywhere. So if you need to like get some bottled water as your body like adjusts to that system also.
Yeah. And then I'd like to close this out maybe by just asking or answering a couple of the other questions that we didn't necessarily touch on that I think are good still. This one's funny because Danny and I are very different people. Do you bring your full arsenal of recovery tools or just certain ones, and which ones, if so? And we both laughed at this question because I bring nothing. I bring the hardest water bottle I can find, and that's like my roller for the week. But I'm also really bad at doing any recovery stuff at home, so it doesn't change when I travel.
Whereas I am the complete opposite and I literally bring everything. If I can bring my Normatec pants, I will. And I bring a massage gun and I bring rubber bands and everything. So yeah, I would say if you have the space for it, bring it. If there's one item that I recommend to people, it's like one of those physio rubber bands, if that's included in your normal routine. But otherwise, yeah, it's just completely personal.
Yeah. Would you rather bring family for vacation post race or fly solo to focus and save money? I love to bring my husband with me. It makes me really sad when he's not there because, especially with being there 10 days in advance, is usually how soon I'm there. And if I'm by myself, I get really bored. So it's nice to have Tommy around.
Yeah, I'm a huge plus one on that. I've done a lot of traveling by myself and I can attest it is tremendously better if you have a loved one with you to share that experience. Regardless of how the race goes, it's just a good reminder that you're going to be loved no matter what. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah. How to get everything into a backpack to save some euros with the baggage in the flights. Honestly, I used to travel with just a backpacking backpack because usually you can fit them into the overhead on the big flights and I could get everything in there.
Yeah, I do. I like the packing cubes if I can, just to kind of like organize and condense. And really, I see everything as it can always be smaller, even with your racing shoes. Like I put all my socks in my racing shoes because to me, I'm like, okay, there's more space. So yeah, and always, I don't know, personally, over the years, I've learned to always take less than I think, especially if you have access to a washer or washing machine. You really only need like 2 to 3 days of clothes and you could just recycle that. So yeah, oh, sorry, go ahead.
I was gonna say really only pack like maybe 2 real outfits because I always pack like 5 and I maybe wear one over and over and over again.
Exactly. No, the same. And with your toiletries, I have some of those like reusable bottles that I'll put stuff into, which helps a lot.
Yeah. So I think we answered most of the questions. We didn't really go over like how long we think you should be there. Because like Danny and I are very privileged. We are both sponsored athletes. Like I get there like 10 days before a race if I can, because I like to see the course. I like to adjust, but not everybody has the same opportunity. And so honestly, just do what works best for you. I would say, 5 days is probably plenty if that's all you have time for. But I'm a big 10-day kind of person.
Yeah, no, we definitely are really lucky. We did get a question about that in regards to being a professional athlete. We can't necessarily say it straight up, but imagine if you got a job and they said you had to be somewhere and they're most likely going to support to help to get you to that place. Another thing too is with the questions that we got online, the overall arching theme again is that expect something to go wrong and you'll kind of just learn as you go to not stress about certain things. And then the last thing is if you're from the US going into Europe, some things to consider is currency changes. You're going to need your passport. Definitely bring some cash, even in places like Chamonix. They prefer cash when you're dealing with smaller transactions. And then also if you're going to take like a taxi or something like that, your phone, some phone lines, like you have to let them know beforehand that you're leaving and you don't want to be, charged like $300 for a phone call or to have service. And so that's why downloading the maps beforehand is really helpful. And then always just plan on customs wherever you're going. So once you land, you're going to go through, kind of like this checkpoint planning thing. So don't plan for any like public transportation within 30 minutes of when you land, because sometimes that can take like 2 hours, depending on the amount of people that are there.
Yep. And with your phone, a lot of companies will let you do month by month international, and that tends to be cheaper than day by day. So
Nice.
Call your phone company, see what's up.
Yes. But yeah, let us know any questions. And if there's enough questions, we'll do a part 2 of this. But I feel like that's pretty good.
Yeah. Should we go to Dolomyths?
Yes, let's do it.
Cool. So the third installation of the Golden Trail series World Series is happening this weekend. The race starts, actually, it will be happening by the time you guys listen to this podcast because it's on Friday at 8 a.m. The race is 22 kilometers long. 10 of it is uphill, 12 of it is downhill. And the race course is kind of a mix of everything. But like we said earlier, it is the most technical course in the series, like by far, and the shortest by quite a bit too. So it starts and finishes in the Piazza Marconi in Canazei. Fun fact, Tommy and I actually got engaged on the mountain across from Pisbo, which is the one that they go up. The altitude difference is 1,750. Oh my goodness, sorry, 1,750 meters. And the race course is marked, and they are supposed to follow all of the course markings because this is kind of like a weird some on trail, some off trail kind of racing.
Yeah. And when we say markings too, it's not like markings on a single track. It's just this open rock.
Flag and a rock.
Yeah. It's just a bunch of rock. Yeah. So it starts roughly at 5K and they top out at like 10,000 feet, which that's kind of crazy to go from 5K to 10K in a 10K.
Yeah.
That's very steep. It's also kind of like a loop. And if you have watched the race on YouTube from 2021, they actually didn't top out at the summit because there were some clouds coming in. But yeah, this race is very exposed, very gnarly. Some of the rules that are not unique to this race, I would say it's probably more common to just sky races in general, is athletes are strongly encouraged. So anyone doing the race to check out the race before competition, because it's very easy, like we said, to miss those flags because it's kind of like this white granite and the flags I think are like an orange. So you can just imagine, you're trying to move fast and looking for those. The route itself is classified as EE, which means for expert hikers. So this is not for the faint of heart. There's slopes and outcrops and debris, and like you most likely will experience many times in this race kind of rock sliding under you. So you have to be very comfortable with that.
And there are sections with ropes also. That's how exposed this gets.
Yes. And if anybody like or if they go or they deviate. Am I saying that right? Deviate. There it is. Deviate from the route, then they are going to be disqualified, which again, like that's to keep everyone safe. Something that's unique about this race in comparison to some of the other Golden Trail races, like you actually are allowed hiking poles and you don't even need to start with them, which to me, this is incredibly wild. Like you can pick up the poles and then hike with them to the top and drop them again before you start the downhill.
Yeah, because they start on the road and then they can pick up their poles at the end of the road section. Like it's like, oh, done running, time to hike.
Yeah.
And I think that there are some athletes in the top 10 that might actually utilize that just based off of like seeing other people in races. Like Manuel Marias is probably going to pick up poles. I could see Caitlin Fielder picking up poles. Like,
yeah,
it would help a ton.
Definitely. Especially if you know how to use them correctly.
Yeah. One of my favorite pieces of mandatory equipment is trail shoes with good soles.
Yes, me too.
Do not wear road shoes.
Do not wear road shoes on that. No carbon shoes in this race. That's for sure. Your ankle would be gone. Okay. So we're going to highlight like the top 10 men and women. So on the men's side, first off, we have Manuel Marias, who's sponsored by Scarpa. He is actually currently leading the series. He's tied with Remy Bonnet. He won Zagama earlier this year, and he recently got fourth at Mont Blanc Marathon. So chatting with MK, we both kind of see this as a strategic move because we wouldn't say he's like the strong favorite, but he is a favorite for it. Like also wouldn't surprise us if he won. But he's
very
not
good at technical running.
Yes, he's very good at technical running. He probably will pick up his bamboo sticks, I would imagine, since he uses those whenever he can. And this race is definitely to his strength. And Remy's not here to kind of, earn some points too.
Yeah. Next up is Stian Angermund, who we just recently interviewed. So if you haven't listened to that, you definitely should check it out. He just won the world championships for the second time in a row in the short trail, but he's also won this race in the past before. He's a very good sky runner. That's how he kind of got his start, was uphill running. And so he definitely won't be slouching on the uphill, and he's an extremely good downhiller.
Yeah. And he, what's it called? What is interesting too, Stian, is this is the only race he's doing all for Golden Trail. So I wouldn't be surprised if he is extra motivated to get the win here. I love that he's jumping into this race. There's really cool clips of him from winning this race in 2021 that we highly recommend. Next up is Bart
Predajowski.
Nice. Good job.
Is that how you say it?
Yeah, from Poland. He's currently third in the series. So it would be great if he got a podium here. He's been in Italy, I think, for like the last, 7 to 9 days training in this area. So he's definitely focused on this race. He is an incredible downhiller and is known for kind of like making moves on the downhill. For us, I think it's more about like he needs to put himself in position because there's so many great climbers in this race. But again, I wouldn't say he's like he's a favorite to win, but I wouldn't be surprised if he ends up in like that 2nd to 4th place area.
Yeah. And something that we forgot to mention earlier when we were talking about the course is that the downhill is really interesting because for the first half of the downhill, they choose their own route. Like, I'm sure there's like guidelines, within like a 20-meter width or something, but they choose their own route on this extremely rocky technical section. And then they get onto a single track, which I imagine is probably pretty fast once you've kind of navigated the rocky portion. So
yeah, and that still has a lot of routes and stuff too. And talking to some runners here who have ran it in the past, they said actually like a common strategy for this race is if you are a strong climber, but maybe not the best downhiller, but like can kind of hold your own, is to go out really hard and on the crest, actually let the downhillers catch you. If it's like within a good amount of time, say they're like 10 seconds behind you, so that you can actually follow their footsteps on the downhill, which I was like, that's genius because you're actually catching your breath while they're catching up.
And that's how Stian told us to get better at downhill, was just to like follow somebody else who's really good at it.
Exactly. Exactly.
And also Bart has finished top 5 in this race twice, so he knows the course pretty well.
Yeah.
The next would be El Huzin. He has gotten second at this race before, I think in 2021. He's currently 9th in the series, pretty much always like in the running for any Golden Trail series race, but this one especially, he's got a really good shot at podiuming.
Yeah, definitely. We both kind of have him called out for the podium. If he's like recovered, he did drop out of Mont Blanc only a couple weeks ago because he struggled from some like heat stroke or something like that. So hopefully he's 100% and ready to go for this one. Next up is Frederick Branchard. He is currently 3rd in the Skyrunning series, and we've talked about him before. He's currently sponsored by Scott, not in the top 10 for the Golden Trail World Series, but he has been in the past in like many of these types of races, and his background is in orienteering. So he's kind of also been called out as like a potential top 5 finisher.
Yeah. Next would be Robert Kimboy. He was top 5 at Zagama the last 2 years. He won Trans-Gran Canaria this year and is currently, he was 6th overall in the standings last year. So this one I see as being a pretty interesting race for Robert because he's obviously very fast, pretty good trail runner, but this is very technical. And so I am curious to see how this goes. Like, I think he'll still be in the top 10 because he's a really good climber, but I just see that, like, especially the beginning of the downhill being a bit of a struggle.
Yeah, definitely. It's not like he hasn't run technical downhill before, because he was in Madeira for the final.
Mhm.
But this one seems very, talking to people who've run it before, it just seems like a very unique downhill. That's a lot of
And
kind
that
of like
just
and big rocks. And again, picking your own line, you think it sounds awesome. But when you suddenly have not a direct way to go, so I think it's a very different mindset when suddenly you have 20 options versus one option.
yeah. No, I think this will be interesting. Like great runner, but there are also a lot of really good downhill runners in this race. So
Yeah. And usually downhill runners win.
yeah.
Next is Thomas Roche. He recently was second at World Champs behind Austrian. Sorry. he was second behind he was second at World Champs behind Stian in Austria. Only 2 minutes, which for that race, I think is a very great finish for him. So he will be in the mix. I think this is his first Golden Trail World Series race. So that's really exciting. He is from the UK, like John Albon. So maybe he has some great downhill skills. Not too sure there. Next up is Manuel Innerhofer. Honestly, didn't have too much on him.
So he just DNF'd at Mont Blanc Marathon as well. So I don't know why.
Yeah.
Maybe hopefully he's recovered from that. Like, I mean, it was pretty hot, but it is kind of every year. So people tend to drop out or drop back due to heat. But he was fifth during the final last year. Like, I don't know what his ranking was going into the Golden Trail World Series, but he was fifth overall last year for the actual final. So, he's raced these guys before. Wouldn't be surprised if he pulled out something good. Plus, he's from Austria, so he's probably like pretty decent at technical running.
Yeah.
Anders or Anders. Danny and I think have talked about Anders before. If you ask anybody in the Golden Trail world, like they will tell you that Anders is the best downhill runner in the world.
Yeah.
So, yeah, Danny, how many people do you think he's going to catch on this downhill?
I'm going to say like 8.
Okay. I like
Because
it.
I think also what is to the advantage in that bet is like he isn't the best climber. So I think he's going to, maybe top out at like 15th or something and then run his way into the top 10 and just catch the carnage. But I really am hoping that they have a very good downhill recorder, like camera person that can just, because he's going to do some crazy shit. Yeah.
Yeah. And then the final guy that we have highlighted is Christian Minogio. He's an Italian, so I figured we definitely need to point him out. He's probably either run this course before or has been out there training for a while, would be my guess. He was 9th at Zagama, and 15th at Worlds. So he's had 2 really good results already this year. So I'm excited to see how that goes.
Yeah. And then we've kind of been mentioning it, but you could tell me if you agree with this or not, MK, but this is kind of my podium that I'm feeling pretty good about. Going to give the win to our boy Stian. I just think when here, and he's in incredible shape right now. And add in the fact that this is the only Golden Trail race he's doing. I just think he's going to come out with some fire there. And then second will be Manuel. And third, it's like El Huzine or maybe like Frederick.
Yeah, I would say Stian and Manuel as well. And I'm gonna stick with El Huzine, I think. Okay. I'm hoping he's recovered from Mont Blanc Marathon. And I mean, he's gotten second at this race before. So
yeah. Nice.
Cool. On to the ladies.
So again, top 10 potential winners. We have Daniela Omis, who she's a German runner represented by Solomon. She's currently leading the series, but she's only leading by 8 points. She's currently sitting at 350 points with the first place at Zagama and a 6th at Mont Blanc Marathon.
Yeah, and she also raced at Worlds and was in the top 5. So like Danny and I talked about this before Mont Blanc, and we're going to talk about it again. Like the amount that some of these women are racing is insane to us, but it seems to be going relatively well for them. So I'm curious to see how they're feeling for this much shorter, much faster race. Next is Sophia Lockley, American hero. She recently won Mont Blanc Marathon. She's very good at races like this because she is a really good uphill runner. So last year she won the race in Norway, which is kind of similar to this race in some senses because the beginning of the downhill was just absolutely reckless and brutal. And basically what Sophia did at this race last year, or in Norway last year, was she hammered to the top and was so far in front of everybody by the time she got to the top that she actually ran, I think, like the fourth or fifth fastest time down, not anywhere near the top, and nobody caught her. So yeah, I could see her doing something very similar on this course.
Yeah. Sophia is like a tremendous, I would say, like power climber too, especially. Like she's just flat out amazing at climbing, but anything in that like 10 to 15K, she can just, climb the heck out of it. I am interested. Well, we'll get into it. So Sophia is a favorite. We don't know if she's the favorite. Mm-hmm. The reason being is there's a couple of women, and one of them is Judith Wider, who recently got second at Worlds. And Judith Wider won the entire series just a couple of years ago. I believe she did. And she has won this race twice. And Judith seems to be like, it's not like she's back, she's better. I've been listening to a lot of Sha'Carri Richardson lately for the USAs, but she had a great race at Worlds. She really just lost the lead at the very end because Clemente outran her kind of on the faster stuff. But Judith is just tremendous at downhill. And when she has run this race in the past, her time is always like with the top like 10 men, which is just absurd and incredible. So we think if there's anyone that might be able to challenge Sophia, it's Judith. And our guess is that Sophia, she needs to get the lead on the climb, and she will. And it's just a matter of how much of a lead she could put on Judith, because Sophia is a very good downhiller too. But I think when you have experience on a course, it does help.
Yeah, Judith has won this race twice. Like she is an orienteer. So like this kind of rocky technical stuff is like no big deal for her. And if you guys haven't listened to our episode with the Adventure Bakery, they tell a really funny story about filming Dolomyths and them just completely like getting run over by Judith because they were like expecting her to come at a later time, and all of a sudden, I don't remember who it was that was filming, but they were like, they hear like move, and she just flies past them and they totally missed her.
Love that. She's so good. It's crazy. So yeah, I'm really excited to see this race. I think there's also extra incentive for Sophia because, another American hero is about to join the series in just less than a month. And that's Grayson Murphy, who is going to come out pretty hot, no doubt, for the last 3 races of the season. And so this is a very good chance for Sophia to get some major points, before, she begins to race Grayson and also Nike in the coming weeks.
Yep. And I do believe that this is also the only Golden Trail race that Judith is doing. I could be wrong, but both she and Stian are just like one and done doing Dolomyths. So they could both take a top position from these people who are really trying to get points.
Yeah. Love that. Love the drama. Next up, we have Elise Poncet, who is another tremendous downhiller. You do not want Elise behind you either. So if I was Sophia, I would literally try to run them both into the ground as much as I can on the uphill. Elise was someone that we mentioned in our Worlds preview for the short course, and she had a bit of a disappointing result there. And I actually learned that she was actually a little injured going into that, and now training has been going well since that race. So I feel like we'll see her kind of in more of her Elise form for this race.
Yep. Next is Tracy LaBouffe, who was third at Zagama, was also third at Worlds. She and Daniela, and we'll talk about Caitlin Fielder as well. Like, they have all done this crazy, like, Zagama, Worlds, Mont Blanc Marathon, now Dolomyths situation. So she's a really good downhiller. I feel like if you're going to run this race, like, you've got to be like a decent downhiller. This is not my type of race because I would be walking on the rocks. But so she's having an amazing season, though. Like, she has knocked it out of the park at all of these races. She had the highest average finish of these women that are doubling back in all three of those races. So excited to see her in this race. Like I said, Caitlin Fielder also has done these three races. She was 12th at Worlds, 8th at Marathon du Mont Blanc, 2nd at Zagama, right?
That's Zagama, yeah.
So I'm curious. I'm guessing this is probably her last Golden Trail race, maybe Sierras and all, but I doubt she's going to America just because she's doing all of these races kind of up front.
Yeah, I would say so too. And to me, like, Judith and Elise are very top tier downhill talents. And then Therese, Caitlin, and Daniela are kind of like that next tier of downhill. And I'm sure they wouldn't mind me saying that. And so I think this is actually maybe a battle between them to see, like, who can get, like, maybe that 4th or 5th position, or, you know, maybe hope that one of those three women that we're kind of saying is the top podium makes a mistake and they can catch them and get on the podium, is kind of the group. See them kind of as a chase pack. Also part of the chase pack is, or who we think is Karina Caricelo. She was 3rd at this race in 2021. And so she does have experience on this course. She's also a great downhiller. I just don't know where her fitness is at as far as speed, because she's been doing a lot of, like, the longer sky races recently.
Yeah, she just did really well at the Minotaur one that we talked about on our last episode, which was a 6.5 hour race. And and before that, she ran Worlds, which I think for her was like around 5.5 hours. So yeah, this race will be very short comparatively, but she's a really good runner. So I'm sure she'll be fine. Anastina was 7th at Mont Blanc Marathon just last month. Fabiola Conti, who is from Italy, she was 14th at Mont Blanc Marathon, was in the top 15 at Worlds. I think she also ran Zagama.
I think she did too, but I can't remember her there. Yeah.
But I can't remember her placing, but, you know, not hometown, but home country. You know, I could see Fabiola duking it out and getting top 10 here for sure.
Yeah. And then just a couple other runners that we're looking out for. There's Malin Osa. She's like a young, fast rising Spanish star. She's on the Spanish Solomon team. And I can't remember if she ended up top 10 in the Golden Trail World Series last year, but she got into like some top 10 results there, which was awesome. And then we have Rachel Drake. This is her first Golden Trail World Series race since Ola Deniria back in 2021. Hopefully you remember. If you don't, I'll remind you, but she was 2nd overall in the Golden Trail World Series standings in 2020. There's some really good videos of her challenging and winning Maud Mathis in the last stage, which was really exciting. So yeah, I'm really excited to see her come back. I talked to her briefly at Western States and she just seemed so excited to be getting back to the series. So love to see that. We also see that Ali Ostrander is registered, but we're very confident she's not racing just based off of,
she's in Italy, but like we haven't seen anything suggesting that she would actually be there to race. So could be wrong. Yeah. If she's healthy and she's in the race, honestly, she'll do really well. Like this is a Mount Marathon type effort, much longer, obviously, but like very similar kind of race. So but I don't think she's running.
Yeah, I don't think so either. All right, podium. You want to call your podium?
Yeah, I don't think anybody's beating Judith. I think so, it'll be close. Sophia will definitely hammer that uphill, but I just, watching her do that race in other, years, it's hard to bet against her. And then I think it's going to be Karina, even though she has been training for these longer efforts. I have seen that woman run downhill and it's terrifying.
It's terrifying. I know. Oh man, I know. The American me would love to see Sophia take another W. And she's just such an amazing uphiller. It's really a beautiful thing to watch, but I'm also leaning towards Judith. I just think this really is a downhiller's racer's race to lose. I don't think you lose it on the uphill. And honestly, Judith can climb too. I mean, we just saw it at Worlds. She can do everything.
Yep.
And then my third is somewhere between like Karina or Elise in there, depending on maybe who gets to the top faster. Because when Karina got third here, she got to the top in third, and then she stayed in third.
Yep.
Yeah. But if they can get some video footage of Elise and Karina running together, oh my gosh, that'd be like good. A down class.
Oh yeah. Well, hopefully you guys, I'm assuming it's also going to be like live streamed on YouTube as well as like all the Eurovision channels. So hopefully you guys are watching on Friday. We definitely will be. And yeah, I think that's it for our preview.
Yep. Thanks again for listening. Once again, this has been the Sub Hub brought to you by Freetrail.